it's almost like I feel stuck doesn't mean that you have no options. It just means you have so many options that you're kind of freezing yourself into inaction. So you kind of need to process that and then just pick the most promising option as an experiment and go forward with that.
Welcome to Season of Stuck, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the all-too-human experience of feeling stuck. I'm your host, Deanna and on this podcast, we explore all things stuck. How and why stuckness happens, what it feels like, how to learn and grow from it, and ultimately, how to get unstuck and move forward in an authentic, empowered way. If you are looking for insights, support, and community as you make your journey from stuck to unstuck, you're in the right place. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Season of Stuck. If this is your first time here and we haven't met yet, hi. My name is Deanna. I am your host, and I am a person that has experienced a lot of stuckness in a lot of different ways. And that experience always felt really personal. I felt like the reason I kept getting stuck was because I was doing it wrong, that I was somehow failing. Stuckness was also a really lonely experience for me. For literal years, I thought that I was the only person who kept hitting these walls and then not knowing how to move forward. But now, I know that neither of those things are true. Stuckness is not a personal failing, and it's not something that just I or just you go through. It is a universal human experience that we will all find ourselves in at some point. Or, if you're like me, at many, many points. And so now I am on a mission to help other people who experience stuckness the way that I did, and to let them know that they're not alone and they're not a failure. And that's what inspired me to start this podcast. So if you have ever felt stuck, or you're currently feeling stuck, or you're just trying to prepare for when you inevitably feel stuck in the future, welcome. You are in the right place. And if this is not your first time listening, welcome back. You probably already know who we are and what we're about here at Season of Stuck, so I appreciate you bearing with me through that. And I also just so appreciate you coming back week after week. Seriously, thank you for being here. So, what are we talking about today? Well, on the show, we talk a lot about the experience of feeling stuck, which makes sense. It's the literal foundational theme of this podcast. But today, we're going to talk less about feeling stuck and more about what to do when you're feeling stuck, as in actionable strategies that you can use to go from a place of, wow, I'm feeling stuck right now, to, okay, I'm feeling less stuck and I have an idea of how I want to move forward. I first connected with today's guest, Mark Levy, more on him in a moment, back in 2018. I was writing an article about how I use the practice of free writing, more on that later in the episode, to get myself out of a career slump and figure out what my next steps were, which ultimately ended up being leaving my corporate job and starting my own business. Also, side note, in looking back at this article, I may have used the word slump, but really what I was talking about was feeling stuck, which just goes to show how long I've been thinking about and writing about and exploring stuckness as a topic. Now, Mark wrote the literal book on free writing, and so I reached out to see if he'd be interested in being interviewed for the article, which he was. And he had so many great insights that not only made the article better, but also helped me understand free writing on a deeper level. And in the years since, free writing has become an integral part of my routine, and a tool that I have used to navigate stuckness of all sorts, from feeling stuck in my personal growth journey, to my relationships, to my habits, to my health. Time and time again, free writing has helped me gain so much clarity into where I'm stuck, why I'm feeling that way, and what I can do to get unstuck. And because free writing has been such a major part of my journey from stuck to unstuck, Now that the podcast is in full swing, I wanted to reconnect with Mark and explore it a bit more deeply. And that is what we're going to do today. Mark Levy is a keynote speaker, differentiation expert, and author of multiple books, including Accidental Genius, using writing to generate your best ideas, insight, and content. Mark is also the founder of Levy Innovation LLC, a strategy and positioning firm that helps organizations and individuals stand out and make an impact through what he calls their big, sexy idea. Oh, and fun fact, Mark also creates magic tricks and shows. One of the shows he co created, Chamber Magic, has run for over 2 decades and is currently the highest rated live show in New York City on TripAdvisor. During our conversation, Mark and I take a deep dive into free writing, which you're probably wondering about, considering I've mentioned it like 20 times in the last few minutes, and why free writing is such an effective tool for getting unstuck. And while I originally planned for this episode to focus exclusively on free writing, Mark actually had a ton of helpful tools and strategies for getting unstuck that don't involve writing at all. So, in addition to insights on free writing, you'll also hear about those tools and how you can use them to navigate whatever stuckness you're currently experiencing. If you are looking for tangible and actionable things that you can do when you're feeling stuck to get out of your head and figure out a way forward, I feel like you're really going to enjoy this episode. So, let's jump into my conversation with Mark. Mark, welcome to Season of Stuck. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Deanna.
I am so excited to chat with you today. The concept and the practice of free writing, which is what we're going to take a deep dive into today, has fundamentally shaped my approach to getting unstuck and has been such a critical tool over these past few years in helping me better understand myself and where I'm at and where I'm going. And so I'm so excited to explore this with you and share this tool with our listeners.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So I guess to get started, I would love for you to introduce yourself to listeners and tell us a little bit about your work.
Yeah, so I'm Mark Levy, and I'll tell you my 9 to 5 gig and how I started this. So I'm a differentiation expert. What I do is I differentiate organizations, brands, and thought leaders around a big, sexy idea, an idea that's going to make them stand out in the world for their business or their personal brand or a book they're writing or a speech they're giving. Like, what's the thing that people are going to talk about even when they're not around? So I help them come up with that differentiating idea, again, whether they're a giant organization or whether they're an individual. And then we talk about how to speak and write about it in ways that capture people's attention and what they're going to remember.
That is such a cool job. You essentially help people and businesses find their special sauce, like the thing that makes them special and different.
Exactly. Yeah, because unfortunately today your good work alone just won't be enough because there's so many people out there doing good work. So you need to do really good work and you need to have some piece of philosophy or some way of doing business or something that makes you distinct that people are going to remember. It's almost like a foot in the door that will allow you to bring your good work into other people's lives. Because if you don't have that, people aren't going to know to pick you. They won't pay attention to you over the 10,000 other people who do what it is you do.
And it seems like not only remember you, but connect with you. I think so much of engagement, whether you're engaging with a business or with a personal brand or even another person, comes back to this connection. And when we highlight the things that make us unique and our personal stories, it's easier for people to foster that connection. And I'm sure that that also helps them get that foot in the door.
Right. If they feel that they know you, and more importantly, if they feel you know them, they are going to have like a tremendous connection with you. So I was talking to you before we started recording that I had just done a TEDx. And as we're talking right now, it's not live, but it'll hopefully be live like in December or so. And the way I begin that TEDx is I say, maybe you run a business. Maybe you're the leader of a movement. You could be an influencer. Maybe you're an artist. Maybe you're a writer. Whatever it is that you're doing work that's important to you, and you'd like that work to be important to other people, maybe lots of other people. But the question becomes, how do you do something like that? How do you get a lot of other people interested in what you're doing? How would you even get them to pay attention to you and what you're doing in the first place?
And I will 100% be tuning in when that TED Talk goes live, hopefully in December.
Thank you.
And then you are also an author. You wrote a book that has been personally very helpful to me called Accidental Genius. So, can you tell us a little bit about your book and about the practice that it outlines?
Yeah, so accidental genius, using writing to generate your best ideas, insight, and content. What it does is it teaches you, and it was the first book of its kind when it came out. Now there are other books in this, but the first edition came out in the year 2000. And in the year 2000, there was no other book like this. It taught business people a style of fast journaling that would help them get to their best business thinking, better thinking than they would get when if they just sat there and thought about what it was that they were doing. And we all know that practice is of free writing, or some of us do, not everyone. It's called different things: spontaneous writing, stream of consciousness writing, free writing. And I like to explain free writing in a bunch of different ways. So, one is free writing means free from the normal rules of writing, because the normal rules of writing often get in our way. So we use writing normally to communicate to other people. That's not what free writing is for. It's not about other people. Free writing is a way of watching yourself think. It's not for other people's consumption, although you can eventually edit it to make it for other people's consumption. It's also free of the demands of proper grammar or pronunciation, or free of even being interesting. Because again, it's just to help you get your thoughts out there. And the important thing about free writing, what it is you set a timer, and I'm going to make it sound super certain, like there's this exact recipe, like baking like Black Forest cake or something like that. It's not like that. You can make variations however you want. But you set a timer for 10 minutes, and then you hit go, and in your laptop or on a pad and paper, it's up to you. You can do it by hand. Or you then type or write nonstop for 10 minutes about whatever it is that you're trying to solve, the problem. And you do not stop for any reason whatsoever. So you're writing fast, a little faster than you normally do. It doesn't have to be breakneck speed, a little faster than you normally do. And you definitely write without stopping. And those two things are super important for this reason. It's that inside each one of us, there's an internal editor that does a very important job. It cleans up what we think and say and write as we think and say and write it, so that we look smart and consistent to other people. So the kind of thing that like Deanna would say or would write, it's like someone will read it and say, oh yeah, this sounds like Deanna. Like this is, she's super smart. Like this sounds like what she'd say. And that stuff's great. Your normal ways of thinking are great, unless you're trying to come up with a thought or an idea or a story or whatever it is that's unlike anything that you've ever done before. So your internal editor is going to keep you stuck, right? Season of Stuck. Mm-hmm. See? Oh, I pay attention to what these shows called. So your internal editor will shepherd you back to the ideas and thoughts and insights that you have over and over again. So it won't let you get to any place interesting. And it thinks it's protecting you. It thinks it's like, oh, you've been successful with these ideas before, or these stories or these strategies or whatever it is. So keep on using these. So when you try to go something interesting, your internal editor won't let you get there. So with free writing, by writing quickly and not stopping for any reason at all and allowing yourself to digress, to write about things outside what you thought you were going to write, what you do is you shake the grip of the internal editor on your mind and you go to new places. And some of the new place that you go to will be nonsensical or it'll be boring. But if you do enough of these 10-minute bouts of free writing, you eventually get to ideas and insights that are better than you would ever have if you just sat there. And so free writing, which I did not invent, it's like 150 years old. Free writing is the best tool that I've ever learned to help with thinking.
I love how you described it with the internal editor. You spoke to a couple of points that have so been my experience and why free writing is so powerful. One of which being that when I'm writing with the knowledge that someone somewhere will someday see it, there is that editor that comes into place where I am shaping what I say, how I say it, the way that I say it to accommodate the people that will one day read it and to frame myself in a way that will be acceptable to those people. So I'm trying to sound smart. I'm trying to sound friendly. I'm trying to sound warm, whatever the case may be. And giving yourself permission to write and never have to show it to another person, like, as you said, kind of loosens the grip of that editor. And I'm not as concerned of sounding a certain way or trying to put sentences together in a way that is intelligent or grammatically correct or whatever the case may be. And that is like such a freeing thing. And it allows me to embody a part of myself that I don't normally embody, because when you're in, conversation and communication with other people, that internal editor is making sure that you're presenting in a certain way. And free writing really loosens that rein and allows you to get to those deeper parts of yourself.
Right, absolutely. It's like a miracle cure. And there's a lot of different ways to use free writing. So, for instance, let's say, because I often talk to business people, but like, let's say you're about to go into an important meeting or an important presentation or so, you can free write what the presentation might go like what it is you're going to say when you start, what the objections might be, what you're going to present. And you can just keep on doing that over and over again. And it's almost like you're living the presentation ahead of time so that when you actually get into the real presentation, you know what to expect, even if surprises happen during it, because you've kind of lived them ahead of time. Or if you're trying to come up with a new strategy, you can test out new strategies. If certain things happen in the market or in the world, here's what I think what's going to happen. And again, unless you've lived this, the people listening to this, unless you've lived the freedom that this is going to allow you, it sounds strange. It's like, well, I can just think of those things. No, because if you just sit there and think of those things, you're thinking too slowly. Your internal editor is going to pull you back to your normal ways of thinking. And I'm not saying that your normal ways of thinking are wrong, they're just tired for you, that you need to go somewhere different.
Well, and there's also when you put the pen to paper or the laptop, however you decide to free write, and you get everything out, even if it seems nonsensical, there's something about having your thoughts like manifested in a physical way that you can then review them later and see connections that you couldn't see before. Like, it helps you make sense of your thoughts and your ideas in a way that you can't really do when those thoughts and ideas are just in your head.
Right. Well, when they're in your head, they're kind of all tangled up. So there's tremendous power in articulating ideas that are only half formed. And we're talking about doing it in writing, and that's my favorite way of doing it. But it's the same thing in even just talking to people. Like one way that you can do free writing verbally, this is very powerful, what I'm going to say. I do not find it as powerful as free writing done over and over again. But there's a technique in Accidental Genius called Blurt It Out from a book by a guy named Chris Barris Brown. I write it about it in Accidental Genius, where it's the idea of you sit with a person like and you establish ground rules first. I sometimes do this in workshops, business workshops. It's, let's say you have a problem. Let's say you're stuck on something. So there's person A and person B. So person A is first going to take 7 minutes. They have a clock. And for 7 minutes, they're just going to talk nonstop as quickly as they possibly can, like a New Yorker,
Mhm.
like myself.
Yep, like us.
So you talk like a New Yorker for 7 minutes. You just talk nonstop as quickly as you possibly can without stopping about the problem that you're having. And wherever you go, you're just downloading all kinds of stuff, whatever you want to say. And then at the end of 7 minutes, the other person now has 3 minutes to tell you what it is that they heard you say, and they talk nonstop as quickly as they can, and what it is they recommend to you in 3 minutes. And again, this is time. And at the end, so it was 7 minutes to download it, 3 minutes, here's what I heard, and here's what I advise. And then you don't want to leave them hanging. They were generous, giving you attention and ideas. So then you finally have 1 minute to say, here's what I heard from you, and here's what I found relevant and what I might do differently. So it's 7 for you to download, 3 for them to respond, and then a minute about what you might incorporate. And then you switch. Then the other person has 7 minutes to do a full download. Here's what's keeping me stuck, blah, 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 blah. And then you have 3 minutes to respond, right? Makes sense? So that would be like a verbal way. So any way of downloading your thoughts in an undifferentiated way onto paper or out into the world is very, very valuable, because if you try to juggle them in your mind, then you allow yourself to get distracted. You can't see things clearly. It's just not going to work well.
Well, and there's also like the experience of, and I will speak for myself, but my brain is a very noisy place. There is always so much going on up here. And the practice of free writing, or I love this idea of like a verbal kind of dump. An extrovert like me is like, ooh, yes, please do that.
Yeah.
But the act of free writing, for me, it almost feels like as I write, the noise level goes down because all those thoughts that are bouncing around up in my head are now flowing out onto the paper. And it allows me to get quiet and connect with like a deeper internal voice. So instead of all of the chatter that's normally in my head, by writing all of that down without censoring myself, it allows me to tap into like that more quiet, wise inner knowing. And I feel like it's that wisdom where all of the great ideas come, or the solution for how to get unstuck, whatever it is that you're writing to figure out, tapping into that internal stillness and like the wisdom that comes with it is like where you find those answers. And free writing has 100% helped me tap into that and get those answers.
Well, what you're saying reminds me of something that I once read somewhere. I forget who said it, but they had said, stuck is a feeling. That's all that being stuck is. Stuck is a feeling. It's never the reality. You are never stuck. It doesn't exist. It's not there. It's like when people talk to me about writer's block, I virtually never have experienced writer's block in my life. It's just, and it's not like, wow, you're so lucky. And it's like, no, I just am very aware of a bunch of different options. If I feel that I'm stuck in writing or thinking about something, I'll call someone and talk about it, or I'll write about it in different ways. I tend to change modes and things. So if I'm stuck writing, I'll write about it, or I'll speak to someone about it, or I'll leave my home office here and I'll go to a coffee shop, or like I'll just keep on changing things up. And then eventually I get going. And it's almost like I feel stuck doesn't mean that you have no options. It just means you have so many options that you're kind of freezing yourself into inaction. So you kind of need to process that and then just pick the most promising option as an experiment and go forward with that. So, in any kind of situation, if I feel stuck, I always go, okay, this is in my head only. This is not a thing in the world.
You love podcasts, and so do I. I am always on the hunt for new podcasts, and I've got some good news for you. I have found a podcast that you are going to love. It's called Blue Sky, and it's hosted by Bill Burke. Each week, Bill chats with inspiring people who are tackling the world's toughest challenges with a fresh dose of hope and optimism. Created by the Optimism Institute, Blue Sky is here to balance out all of the doom and gloom we see in the media by offering a positive, forward-thinking view of the future. From climate change to AI, homelessness to immigration, Bill and his guests cover it all, bringing in diverse perspectives that leave you feeling inspired and uplifted. Every episode reminds you that no matter how cloudy things seem, there's always a blue sky above. It's all about shifting your perspective and finding hope in even the hardest conversations. So, if you're ready for a podcast that leaves you feeling good about where we're headed, check out Blue Sky on any major podcast platform. It's the perfect way to clear the clouds and embrace a brighter future. And really, what's better than that? And it also, so stuck by definition, right, is that inertia. And so any step in any direction is like putting you on the path to get unstuck. Like even like a small, I'm going to go in another room if I'm feeling stuck by this problem. Or to your point, I'm going to go out and work at a coffee shop because I'm not thinking correctly here. We had a guest on for our 5th episode. Her name is Britt Frank. She is a brilliant therapist and author. She wrote this book called The Science of Stuck, which is all about kind of what's happening in the brain and the body when we get stuck. And one of her methods that she recommends is what she calls micro yeses, which is just like saying yes to the smallest thing that you can say yes to in any given moment when you're feeling stuck. And those start to compound onto each other. And all of a sudden, you're fully on the path to becoming unstuck. So yeah, it's about like, there's always options available. And sometimes it's just about choosing one of those options and getting that momentum going.
Well, related to the micro yeses, which I love that, it reminds me another one of the things that I use to get me unstuck if I feel I'm stuck in a situation is I start to clean my house.
Me
I'm sure a
too.
lot of people, yeah, but like someone might think of that as procrastination, but I end up having a clean house and the house needed to be cleaned anyway. And by getting into action and seeing things being accomplished, I just overtly like ride it into my to-do list and the stuff that I need to do. It's just like I build up a head of steam. So now I have the clean house. And now I just turn it into the things that I have to do for business or whatever it is. You do that too?
I do. It is like my go-to because there's also something about cleaning specifically, like creating order in my external world helps me create order in my internal world. So if I'm feeling stuck or confused or like I don't know which way I need to go or what I need to pursue, there is something therapeutic about organizing and figuring out the steps in my external space that then helps me get a little more organized internally, which I find very helpful when I'm feeling stuck or when I'm feeling unmotivated or when I'm feeling unsure. Just super helpful.
Instead of therapy, we need lemon pledge. That's what I
It is a form of therapy. I'm with you on that one. It's good to know that I'm not the only one who like anxiety cleans.
exactly. No, I love it. So there's a therapy in Japan that I learned from a gentleman, Dr. David Reynolds, and it's based on Zen Buddhism, and it's called Morita therapy. You're going to love this. So Morita was a contemporary of Freud, and they didn't know each other. They were just around the same time. And so Morita felt that a lot of people's problems was that they paid too much attention to their feelings, that they were not attending to the outside world enough, that they were too internally focused. You can say that's wrong. I'm just telling you what Marita therapy is about. And forgive me if I'm misascribing what Marita therapy is about. I'm doing this off the top of my head. So that we pay too much attention to our feelings, and that causes a distortion and so forth. And so in Japan, when they would treat you, a Marita therapist would treat you. So they were psychiatrists, right? They could administer drugs if they wanted to. So you would go to a hospital and they would lock you into a room. It was like your bedroom for the night. And there would be a bed there and maybe like a bureau for your socks or something, but nothing else. No pamphlet, like you couldn't bring anything in other than your clothes. And so you would kind of be in there for a while and they'd bring your food to you and whatnot. You weren't in prison, but you just had to stay there. So you'd be there for a day. And then the next day, they would bring in like a broom and they would put it in there. And they wouldn't tell you what to do, but you were so grateful that you had something to do that you'd start cleaning the room.
Oh, interesting.
Right. And then I don't know the progression. Like, I'm not a Marita therapist or anything, but I don't know the progression. But it was the idea of you would learn, like, they would force you to pay attention to your own thinking and your own thoughts. And you would see over and over and over again. And you would see how little that would get you. And so when you had to pay attention to the world and take care of the world, that you would realize how much better you felt and how much things would change around you. So the idea is, like, when you left, like, you would pay more attention to helping people do things and taking care of things and whatnot. Again, don't be critical of me if you say that's nuts.
I think that it is a very effective, or it seems to be like a very effective way to get, for people like me who get stuck in their head, to get them out of their head and like into the world around them, which feels like
That's right.
for a lot of people would be super helpful because we get stuck in our brains, in our thoughts, and that can feel paralyzing.
Well, related to that, one of the reasons why I love free writing is that you're thinking with your fingers. It's less about your mind. You're typing too fast and too continually to be ordering your mind to do certain things. You're just following the physical manifestations of your fingers moving. So it's almost like you're going for a run.
Yeah, almost like more somatic, like you're in your body, and that's part of the processing.
That's exactly right. You're thinking physically rather than just mentally. And so that's one of the reasons why I love it. The other thing about with free writing as a way of getting unstuck is if you write for 10-minute blocks or 15-minute blocks or 20-minute blocks, like, you can do multiple blocks. I would not say I wouldn't do them without resting. Like, I'd do 10 minutes and then I'd stop and read over for 2 or 3 minutes what I wrote and then say, where do I want to start the next block? And then I do 10 minutes and I'd read over what I wrote for 3 minutes. And then where do I want to start the next one? And sometimes I'd go for hours. But there's something about attacking your problem physically that gets you to new places. So part of the work I do, I'm this differentiation guy. And I tell people sometimes you can't really think your way out of a problem. That's not going to work. That you need to act your way out of the problem or behave your way out of the problem. So I'll give you an example. There was a client of mine, a renowned client, like major speaker, the top writer, most books sold in his vertical, in his subject. And so one day he hired me, said, I want to write a book unlike any other book that I've ever written before. And I said, what do you want it to be on? And he said, I don't know. That's why I'm hiring you. And so I asked him, what's preoccupying you these days? What's something really interesting to you? And he told me a story that was a great story, but it sounded like the type of great story that he often tells me. In other words, it sounded, right, in an internal editor way, it
Yep.
sounded like the kind of stuff he writes about. So that's not something unlike what he's written about before. So what I said to him was, here's what I want you to do. Have you ever been to Comic-Con? And he said, no, I always want to go. I said, great. He said, I happen to know. He so always wanted to go. He said, I know that there's a Comic-Con in 2 weeks near my house in Boston. And I said, great. So he was going to write a marketing book. I said, I want you to go to Comic-Con and I want you to interview any 10 people you find there. So maybe someone dressed in cosplay, maybe someone manning a booth. You can interview Harrison Ford. Like you can mix and match whoever you want. And I want you to find 5 things about marketing you didn't know when you got there. This to one of the top marketers in the world. So do that and then come back to me and download what you had. And so he did that. He went off. And when he came back and he shared with me what he had found, it became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. And it's still
Wow.
his brand today. And that was from the idea of, okay, you're brilliant and you're stuck in the brilliance. So you kind of need to walk around as a stranger in a new way. That's back to my wonderful TEDx talk that's not out yet,
Mm-hmm.
where I talk about it. I say, your good work alone won't be enough. You need some way to stand out so that people will pay attention to you over paying attention to other people in your field. And the problem with knowing how to stand out is that you have the curse of expertise or the curse of knowledge, that you're too close to your work, you know your work too well, that you are blinded in it. You can't get a conceptual distance between you and your work to see what makes you special. Other people outside your realm can see it because they don't have the kind of knowledge you do. But for you, it's hard. So you're going to have to find a way to become a stranger in your own business so that you see your own business in a starkly different way so you can see what makes it special and interesting to other people. And then in the talk, I explain how to do that. But yeah.
Well, and to your point, like when you're feeling stuck, whether that's in your business or looking for a new idea or whatever the case may be, like by definition, you are wanting and needing something different. But you can't have something different if you're not willing to do something different. Like
Right.
your old thinking is going to yield old results. In order to get new results and get unstuck, you have to do new things. And I love the Comic-Con. That's like the coolest new thing you could do ever.
Right. Right. Well, I like to tell people we'll come up with an idea for their business and they'll say, so is this the best idea that we have? And I say, it's the best idea that we have given the input that we have. If you want a different idea, there needs to be fresh input. No fresh input, this is the idea to go with. Does that make sense? So I'm
Absolutely.
always thinking, if I'm not getting what it is I need, I'm always thinking, what's the new input? And sometimes, by the way, I don't know exactly what that new input should be, but I know there needs to be new
Mm-hmm.
input.
Yeah.
You don't know, again, to go back to therapists, we're talking about a lot of therapy today.
It comes up a lot on this show.
Right. So a friend of mine, Bill O'Hanlon, so Bill is the guy who created solution-oriented therapy, but Bill also did a wonderful book. He's written like 60 books. One of his books is called Do One Thing Different. He was on Oprah for it. And the idea, it's one of the techniques in this book of do one thing different. And the do one thing different thing is the idea of, and again, forgive me if I'm going to say it, if I'm killing what Bill actually says, but this is how I remember what it is. Do one thing different means that you need to try something new to change yourself. You don't know what that thing is. That's the key. You don't know what that is. So don't wait until you figured out what it is. Like, don't become perfectionistic. Do one thing different and then see what the results are over the course of a day or multiple days or whatnot. And if that doesn't get you the results you're looking for, then do something else different. Take a different path to work. But the idea there is you can't possibly know ahead of time. People will come to me and they'll want coaching on writing a book, and they'll chide themselves for not having written the book on their own. And I'll say, have you ever written a book before? And they'll say, no. And I'll say, so why do you think you would know how to write a book if you've never written a book before? And by the way, if you have written a book before and now you're having a problem writing this book, well, every book is different. Like it's about a different subject or something. So why would you think what you knew about the first book is going to help you with the second book?
Mm-hmm.
Does this make sense? Like it's just
Yeah.
getting very logical about these things down to their foundations so you can move pieces around and get unstuck.
Yeah. And I feel like sometimes we get stuck because we feel like we have to continue being the person that we are today, doing the things that we're doing today, right? Like we're like, this is the box of who I am. And so I need to do things within this box. But I think the most powerful gift that we can give ourselves is the permission to change, to not have to fit in the box of who we think we are, to try new things, to put ourselves out there and to allow that box to shift. Like if I was the same person that I was a year ago, for me, that wouldn't feel like a good year. I'm constantly trying to put myself out there and try new things. And that is what keeps me moving. And when I stop doing that is when I get stuck. But I think oftentimes we get stuck in our identities, in being, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is how I interact with the world. And doing one new thing makes it accessible to start shifting that identity and like really stepping into the next version of yourself.
I love that, what you're saying. And so, for one thing, we're actually very inconsistent. We have an identity of who we think we are, but actually that identity is often very wrong. Like we're not as consistent in our behavior or thinking as we think we are, but we kind of force ourselves to think that there's a coherence, that we're the same person that we were, and we're not really. But I love what you're saying. Sometimes a way to get unstuck or a way to change your identity is to trick yourself into it. So I'll tell you a story. Actually, this is one of my favorite stories. It's actually an accidental genius. So, as you know, Deanna, I have a background as a magician, right? I
Mhm.
created magic tricks and I read your mind before we began here.
Yes, you did.
How did I do?
12 out of 10.
Right, exactly. Thank you. So, I love magic and I invent magic tricks and illusions and shows and things like this. And one day, this was years ago, my wife was taking a computer science course. This was 20 years ago. And she came home one night from school and she said, I want you to invent a magic trick for me. And I said, what are you talking about? Because anyone knows, like magicians, your spouse does not sit still for a magic trick. Like they see too much, like they don't want to see anything. So the idea that she'd asked me to invent one for her, she'd never asked that before. It was the strangest out of left field thing in the world. It's like, why do you want me to invent a magic trick for you? And she said, my computer science teacher gave me an assignment that sounded like a magic trick. And I said, what was the assignment? And she said, he said, I want you to write a program in a specific language that asks a computer to think of a number from 1 to 99 and not to tell you. And then you have to guess that number in 10 guesses or less. And I said, okay, I can see where that sounds like a magic trick, so I'll help you. So I took a big yellow legal pad and a pen, and I sat down on the bed and I wrote down, all this was written down. I said, First, ask the computer to think of a number from 1 to 99 without telling you. Then the second step is ask the computer if it's thinking of a single digit number. If it says yes, then guess all the single digit numbers and you will get the right guess in 10 guesses or less. Then I said, if it says no, then ask the computer if the number it's thinking of is odd or even. And I forget all the steps. If it's above 50 to 99 or 49 to, like, there was all these different configurations. And so I wrote on a couple of pages the steps for this magic trick. It took me about 40 or 50 minutes. And at the end of it, I was finished. Now, it was not a deceptive trick. It's not a trick that anyone, it would be transparent to you if I did the trick, but it was a trick. Think of a number and I would get it in under 10 guesses. And so my wife said, great. So give me that. She took the legal pad from me. She said, give me the algorithm that you wrote. And I said, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And she explained to me that an algorithm was this mathematical instruction and so forth. And what I had written down could definitely be classified as an algorithm. And so here it was that I had created a magic trick and I'm the one it fooled because I hated math. I was terrible at math in school. I would always flunk math. And if my wife had come home and said, I want you to help me write an algorithm, which is what I wrote, I would have been angry. Like, what are you making fun of me? I would have been confused. But if I wanted to help her, it would have taken me probably months to read books to like get up to speed on it, whatnot, before I would begin very nervously. But because we approached the assignment in a way that made sense to me, that I loved, like, oh, this is a magic trick. I just sat right down. Like there was no winding up. It's like a magic trick. Okay. Like I just went to it. And so that would be an example. Sometimes when I'm stuck, I will often think of what's another way that I can think about what this is. Like, what else is this? If you consciously reframe it, if you consciously look at it from a different way, if you trick yourself into seeing it a different way, if it's from a different paradigm, I've come up with tremendous answers in that kind of way. It's kind of like, oh, how would someone in the military solve this? I've come up with tremendous answers from things, from adopting different ways of different perspectives and different identities.
Mark, I feel like you have shared so many helpful frameworks for getting unstuck. So we have free writing, which is set a timer for 10 minutes, write consistently without stopping for that 10 minutes about whatever problem it is that you are trying to tackle as a way to get your brain unstuck and tap into your inner wisdom and creativity. There is this idea of doing something different every day, of doing new things and collecting new input in order to get new results and output. And then there is also this idea of almost tricking yourself when you find yourself stuck on something, to find a different creative way to think about it. Not think about it as this is me tackling this problem, but instead see how you can change that perspective or take a different approach. And it's almost like you can find answers by like going in the side door.
That's exactly right. And will also let me say, remember that blurted out thing where
Yes.
the idea
Yes.
of forcing yourself without editing to articulate where you are in the problem and what you're being stuck on and allowing yourself to digress and so forth. That forced articulation at great length also does wonders to help getting you unstuck.
Yeah. Essentially the verbal form of free writing.
Right.
Yeah.
And we talked about Lemon Pledge.
Yes. And if anybody out there is feeling stuck, just grab your broom and get to sweeping.
Exactly.
Mark, this has been such an incredible interview. Like I said, I feel like I am walking away with so many insights as to how to approach stuckness in a different way. And I know that listeners are likely feeling the same. As we near the end of the interview here at Season of Stuck, we have one question that we ask all of our guests. So if it's okay with you, I just have one other question for you.
Sure.
Okay. So, thinking about your ideal future self, like the Mark you are working every day to one day grow into, if he could travel back in time and talk to the present day version of you, what advice do you think he would give you on how to navigate stuckness at this point in your life?
Who's to say that I haven't traveled back in time?
Ooh, I like that perspective.
Right. Let's say if I traveled back in time, what advice would I give myself now? Right. Go back then about easily, easily, easily is that so now when I write down lists of things that I'm going to do, let's say from a marketing perspective or a sales perspective or working with clients or whatever it is I'm doing, I always include something that I think of as a risk. I always include at least one action that makes me painfully uncomfortable. And 90% of the time I do it. I don't do it 100% of the time, but almost always I do that thing. So I'd go back and I would tell myself that you should seek out discomfort and you should seek out risk. And just because you think that you're not ready, if you feel anxiety about doing something, that anxiety probably just means that thing that you're doing is important to you. It doesn't mean you're not ready, it's just showing you it's meaningful. So the anxiety is actually this wonderful gauge that you're doing exactly what you should be doing. So go ahead and do it rather than saying, I'm anxious. I must not be ready. I must not be the type of person who can do this. Let me step back. No, that means you're exactly the person to go that way.
Mhm.
So that's the idea I'd give.
I love that. Like, do it even if you're scared, or maybe especially if you're scared.
That's right. That's
I
right.
love that
Right.
advice.
Right. Fear, court fear, seek out fear.
I love that, especially for like a risk averse person like myself. I think that that is some advice that current Deanna also needed to hear. So thank you. Mark, again, this has been such a fantastic interview. I so appreciate you being on the show. For anyone listening, if they want to connect with you or learn more about your book, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah. So my website is levyinnovation.com. That's Levy innovation.com. You can watch my TEDx talk when it
Mhm.
actually goes live. Just look up Mark Levy, Marklevy. And the name of it right now, the name can always change. The name's not up to me. Sometimes it gets changed or whatnot. But right now, the name is Your Secret is Obvious. I don't know what it if it's not that when you go search for it, I apologize. But those are the ways. And my email is mark@levyinnovation.com. You can always just email me. And it's Mark with a K. Levy, mark@levyinnovation.com.
Amazing. Mark, thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for today. A huge thank you to our guests for their incredible insights, and a huge thank you to you, our listeners. We know that there are so many podcasts out there to choose from, and we are just so grateful that you chose ours. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider recommending the podcast to a friend or family member that you think would enjoy it. And to make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. And while you're there, if you loved the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It plays such a huge part in getting this podcast out to a wider audience and ultimately supporting more people on their journey from stuck to unstuck. And to keep in touch and access even more stuck-related content, follow us on Instagram @Season of Stuck and visit our website, seasonofstuck.com, where you can sign up to get episodes delivered directly to your inbox. Thank you again for being here. It is so, so appreciated. Until next time, I'm Deanna DeBera, and you're listening to Season of Stuck.